Vince, thank you very much. Am I audible? Okay, thank you. So, Vince, thank you very much. Firstly, let me thank all of you for being here this morning to chat to us about the past year in Parliament, in the Gauteng executive, in the Gauteng province, and in the Gauteng legislature, as well as the various other important issues, such as the state of the government of national unity, what the way forward is, and some of the other political work that we do. So, let me first acknowledge my colleagues, our national chair, Vuiswa Ramokgopa, to my right, and Makashule Ghana. He's not Ghana, he's Ghana, by the way. To my left he's with me in Parliament. He serves on various committees, on the Ethics Committee, he's on the Chief Whips Forum, on the Programming Committee, on the Police Portfolio Committee, Transport, and so on and so forth. I serve on the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, and as you know, Vuiswa is the MEC for Agriculture and Rural Development. So, colleagues, it's just over a year since the 7th Parliament and administration began. We as Rise Mzansi have asked for this meeting, for this briefing, to talk about our work in Parliament. Over the next 10 to 15 minutes before we have a conversation, I am going to cover a number of themes, namely the state of the government of national unity. We believe it needs a reset instead of latching from one crisis to the next. While the country itself is in crisis, it certainly is unhelpful. We're also going to talk about our work in Parliament and Gauteng. Ghana and myself and Vuiswa were backed by our party to join the GNU to make a difference in various critical ways. We will share some insights with you today. And then critical developments in the country, including the crisis in the security cluster, immigration, the economy, and municipalities. We are in the city of Joburg, which itself is latching from one crisis to the next, depending on which day of the week it is. We'll also talk about why political party leaders have to get over themselves and work together for a truly progressive, rational politics. Cheap populism that exploits the pain South Africans feel every day may be interesting in the short term, but our problems need leaders who can unite, devise effective solutions, and engage the best talents that we can find. So let me start with the GNU. The GNU is an experiment, and we cannot expect it to be perfect. But we must also make a candid assessment of the state of the GNU. Currently, 9 political parties have individual agreements with the ANC. And we spend too much time and energy worrying about the squabbles between the ANC and the Democratic Alliance, because that's what some of the big policy disputes have been about, whether it is Bella, whether it is the budget, and so on. Obviously, that was a much bigger conversation, but fundamentally, when the ANC and the DA diverge at critical times, it plunges the country into an unnecessary crisis and uncertainty. We also need proactive political management, because one of the biggest challenges that the GNU has brought upon itself is that while the executive meets on a regular basis to deliberate on and drive the government's program, you've got much less of that at a political level. The times that the parties meet have been the times when there is a problem, whether that is Bella, whether that is the budget, and so on. You cannot drive a cohesive political program over a 5-year period if you only meet when there's a problem. So that's why we say that it needs a reset. We have discussed this issue, without going into the details of that, when we finally agreed to back this current budget, and all the parties committed to backing this current budget that was recently passed. We did make an assessment of where the GNU is. And so what I'm saying is not something that the other GNU leaders, all the way to the president, have not discussed before. In fact, now that the budget is done and we finally can get on with the rest of the legislative program, I am hoping that the meeting that we all undertook to have as GNU leaders is going to take place, so that we can get on with devising a more cohesive political and legislative program where it's not just in the executive, it's how the caucuses work together in Parliament within reason, because the parties have not merged. They still have their respective identities. But we need regular and scheduled meetings of the leaders of the GNU, all the parties represented in. There needs to be a hotline to iron out interpersonal issues, as well as a full functioning of the clearinghouse mechanism, which last met in March. It's now going to be September. So when I talk about effective political management of the GNU, those are some of what I'm referring to. We can talk detail when we get to questions and answers, so I won't give a long thesis. The second thing that I want to talk about is the work that we have done in Parliament. I must tell you, we all see people falling asleep in the plenary in the afternoon in Parliament, and we think they rocked up like at 1:30 after lunch, and they sat there and then they fell asleep. There's a lot of work that gets done in Parliament. I must say personally, as a new MP, I've got a serious appreciation of it. Has stretched us, because you also have to read all the documents that get brought in. You have to engage with the information. And for me, for instance, as chairperson of a committee, especially one with a large scope such as SCOPA has, you also have to make sure that there is a committee program, the documents are ready, they get to the members on time, you can drive the meetings, you can do follow-ups and so on. So it has been a learning curve on the one hand. Ghana has been at every level. He's been in parliament, legislature, and council, so he can do the stuff in his sleep. I can't. And Vuiso has never been an MEC either before, so I'm sure there are lessons that she will talk about there. But we set out to try and be as effective as possible, even though we are obviously a small caucus in parliament, and we'll talk about Gauteng just now. We set out to be as effective as possible. We lobbied fairly significantly for the role that I have in Parliament as chair of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. We lobbied various political parties. Fortunately, we got the support for the role. And we are going to use the role, and we continue to use the role, to drive more effective government together with the other political parties. Everyone talks about irregular expenditure and so on. One of the biggest problems in government is inefficient expenditure. Spending money where you cross all the T's and dot all the I's, but at the end of the day, whatever you spend money on actually produces naught. That happens a lot. At municipal level, at provincial level, at national government level, in state-owned companies, in state agencies, and so on. So whenever I've been talking about expenditure reviews with the Minister of Finance, we also talking about those things. It's not just the corruption, which is important to fight. But I think if we spend taxpayers' money efficiently, we'd get a hell of a lot more done with the same budget. We can talk detail, because I've got plenty of examples that I can use. But we also have done a couple of things. So Makashule serves on the Police Portfolio Committee, and we cannot build a truly democratic, safe, prosperous, and equal and united state when people are unsafe in South Africa. This relates to both general safety, and one of the issues that we've picked up is safety and security in schools. For example, in 2024-25, about 25,423 cases of murder were recorded, representing an increase of 21.74% when compared to 2023-2024. Now, when we see people responding the way they do to General Mkhwanazi, Lieutenant General Mkhwanazi, and so on, it is a reflection of the level to which people feel unsafe in South Africa. And when a senior police official says there is corruption that makes sure that the violent criminals and the people that steal public money get away with murder because they collude with the police, South Africans justifiably are going to get upset. And I'm really glad that there is a commission of inquiry that is chaired by Justice Madlanga, because also the quality of the judge that chairs the commission matters a lot. So we're quite happy about that. And Makash Sule will talk about the work that he's doing in the Police Portfolio Committee. We've also focused on transport, both of us, for two reasons. One, Makash Sule is on the Portfolio Committee. The Standing Committee on Public Accounts has chosen transport as one of the clusters that it focuses on over the next 4 years. The reason is that transport and logistics are absolutely critical to the functioning of the economy. You've got our ports, you have the seaward economy, you have Transnet, you've got PRASA, you've got the Road Accident Fund, the Road Traffic Management Corporation, and so on. All of them have got problems to varying degrees, including the train smash that is at the Road Accident Fund and the problems at the Road Traffic Management Corporation and so on. So it is important that we make a contribution in that area. Ghana serves full time on the Transport Portfolio Committee, and he can speak ad nauseum about some of the issues there. And then there's trade, industry, and competition. Once again, this portfolio plays a critical role in the economy and has been plagued by controversy relating to various issues. There is also the lot short tender, which I will not talk a lot about because, at least from the perspective of the committee, because the Auditor General, we are the main client of the Auditor General, and the Auditor General is busy with the audit. That I don't want to preempt it, but what we do know is that we do need to cast an eye over the process that led to the awarding of that contract to make sure that it was above board, and to the extent that there is financial leakage for taxpayers is something that the committee would look at. We will expand on some of the issues that we've dealt with in Parliament. Now, one of the things that we also decided to do was to drive issues. I think you will all agree with me when I say to my left here is Mr. Gambling in South Africa. And that's because we also made a conscious choice politically during the campaign, and we decided to do it after the campaign, which is that we are going to focus on things that affect the lives of South Africans on the daily, so that we do not have a situation where we talk about nice ideological issues, and it's an interesting conversation for people who dabble in that kind of thing. But we are not dealing with the issues that South Africans worry about. Gambling affects families. It affects people. There are suicides, people lose their homes, they lose their cars, and so on. And the industry does not self-regulate, and government regulations are years and years behind. And Ghana will talk about his experiences with that issue in his interactions with various authorities, gambling boards, the Minister Pakstow, and so on. I'm just going to highlight the areas where we've decided to focus as the Standing Committee on Public Accounts, because I think this is important. So the Standing Committee on Public Accounts deals with over 500 entities that receive money from the government. We just simply can't look after all of them. So we've chosen clusters as a committee. Some of those are water and sanitation for obvious reasons. That is the next load shedding that we're going to get. It's district municipalities, it is water boards, it is the National Department of Water and Sanitation. Then there is local government. Every business is in a municipality. The basic services are delivered by municipalities. We are beginning to focus on district municipalities and all of the metros, plus the municipalities that have been flagged by the Auditor General as being particularly problematic, to put it mildly. We can talk detail around that as well. Then there is the defense environment. The Department of Defense has the worst audit outcomes of any government department for years. I was shocked when I looked at, I was reviewing the audit outcomes for the past 3 years together with the Auditor General. It's at the point where the AG is actually exasperated by the lack of response, either from ministers or from senior officials in the army. They waste money, they misappropriate money, money gets stolen, they misspend it on the wrong equipment, things get bought and delivered and they're already obsolete. There's a litany of things. So I'm quite interested, and I must say irritated, when people go to other countries and make political statements when the army is collapsing here. The guys don't even have boots that look the same. When you see soldiers next time, look at their boots. They don't look the same. Other guys are wearing brown shoes. Others are wearing red boots and so on. The camouflage they have are supposed to get changed 10 years ago. Those who've got the new uniform are few, so sometimes the uniform doesn't look the same, and people take private jets to fly somewhere and make statements. It's silly. Then there's ESCOM, which is the energy space. Basically, it's not just ESCOM, it's that entire state. The Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, and as I've said, we are going to have an inquiry with the Road Accident Fund. That's going to go on for about a month and a half of hearings. We are expecting to call north of 30 witnesses to come and testify. When I tell you that it's a train smash, I don't want to use F words, but it really is truly is that institution has been gutted to almost nothingness. It used to be able to process over 250,000 claims per year. Last year they did 63,000. And yet they've spent the same money that they were spending when they were settling 257,000 claims. That equation just doesn't work at all. But I'm quite happy to get into that as well. So I also need to talk a little bit, and Voice will give the detail about the work in the Gauteng Department of Agriculture and Rural Development. So one of the things we campaigned on was ending hunger, if you recall. And one of the reasons when the Premier of Gauteng called me up and said that he would like to invite Mzansi into the executive, this was the issue that I also placed on the table. So there was a meeting of minds in terms of where Vuiswa goes into the executive, because if you are to deliver on the food issue, you need to be, in agriculture and rural development. And there have been several initiatives that she will talk about. But one of the things that she did was to gather a hunger symposium, bringing people from civil society, business, and government. And the target is to reduce exposure to hunger by 10% by 2029. Currently, the department is supporting 192 urban community gardens in schools and communities over Gauteng. The other thing that she needed to do was to kind of fight the what shall I call it? The corruption that takes place in government departments. There's been some media coverage of some of the steps that she has taken at her own initiative, because without clean government, you just cannot get the kind of outcomes that you're looking for. I cannot remember what those wheelbarrows were costing, but you will tell us. But when you waste money on things that don't yield an outcome, again, it's part of the reason why we're not able to deliver. And then there's driving industrialization and creating sustainable jobs. So I think you'll tell us, I think in the agri sector, the Gauteng as a province, when you take the totality of the sector, the contribution is well over 10%. I'm not sure what the number is, Voice or not, but I was surprised, because you always think farming is in Limpopo, the Eastern Cape, the Free State, etc. But when you look at the entire value chain, Gauteng plays a critical role. They've done the first Gauteng's first agro-processing convention to drive broad-based industrialization in the agri sector, and also supporting the next cohort of agri leaders via the agricultural education, and supported agricultural education via the Mahalisburg Secondary School, creating workplace experience opportunities for 68 unemployed graduates via the department's graduates program. But Voice will talk to the detail. Now, let me deal with a couple of things, and then we can have questions. So firstly, there's the ad hoc committee and the Madlanga Judicial Commission of Inquiry. The two must happen together. The separation of powers in South Africa. Parliament must do its work, and the Judicial Commission of Inquiry must do its work. There are people who believe that a Commission of Inquiry is not needed. You cannot have the police investigating themselves, firstly. Secondly, you cannot ask another member of cabinet to investigate their colleague when they are also from the same political party. I understand that, South Africans are tired of commissions. I'm tired of them too. But at the end of the day, if there is to be an investigation, it must be credible. Otherwise, then you are just wasting time. The only thing I hope that both the ad hoc committee and the Judicial Commission of Inquiry will do is to be thorough and to finish their work as quickly as possible. In the case of the RAF inquiry, for instance, we've decided that by the end of this year, we will have delivered our report, made all the recommendations, and the hearings need to be done by the second week of November, so that we can complete our report by the end of November or early December and make sure that is all done and people can see action being done. Otherwise, you go on for 6-7 months with a commission where people hear bad news. You depress and you just piss them off because they hear all of this bad stuff coming out, but they don't see any change. Then there is the national dialogue that everybody is having a lot of discussion about. Look, South Africans have actually not been consulted or been given a platform outside of party political branch meetings. to make a contribution about what should happen to South Africa. And I think it's important that we regularize and make it a habit for creating platforms for South Africans to express their views. It's good that, for instance, the deputy president of South Africa is in a meeting where he gets to see how angry people are about various things. It's very important. Then it's not the media driving an agenda. It's real people sitting in front of him and talking about their own experiences. But that said, I want to say the following. Anybody who thinks, including people who participate in the dialogues that are going to take place, that you can get into a meeting, produce a piece of paper, and things will happen, is deluding themselves. What is important is that, especially the civil society organizations that go there and participate, they are willing to hit the streets and campaign politically for those things to happen. They are not going to happen otherwise. They just won't happen. South Africa's politicians are so used to accepting memoranda and tossing them in the bin that even if it comes out of a convention, they will still do that. So the activism that follows is really important. Then there is the issue of political party consolidation and the road to local government. Municipalities are a mess. Now that I am in the committee and chairing the committee and having access to information that is not easily available to the public, I must tell you, there is nothing left in most municipalities. And there are usually big ideological discussions about neoliberalism and all of these things. Let me put it this way. If municipalities continue to be dysfunctional, there will not be a net increase in jobs in South Africa. If there's no infrastructure at a local level, roads are full of potholes, they virtually don't exist, there is no water, electricity supply is erratic, and the municipality can only pay salaries. If the city of Johannesburg is not able to run itself properly, then it's a problem. There is no single political party that has got enough talent to turn all the municipalities around. Not one. Not the ANC. In fact, even if you were to combine most of them, there is still not enough talent within those political parties to turn things around. A different kind of politics is needed. We have been in conversation with various political parties about working together in next year's local government elections, as well as all the way into 2029. I think we agree generally that too much fragmentation can be counterproductive. We don't have airs about ourselves. We are quite happy to work with other political parties if the political program is clear, if the political culture of that combined organization is clear, if we agree to use data-based political policy making and we don't just suck things from thin air and make a statement because it's going to be popular, but you actually cannot produce an outcome and so on. So we quite keen to work with other political parties to make sure that we can galvanize as many South Africans of high quality and ability to change things in local government. The city of Johannesburg being a prime example. In the case of the city of Johannesburg, I also want to use it to talk about the last point that I want to make, and that is a crisis of leadership in South Africa. Johannesburg is a crown jewel of South Africa economically. It is falling apart. It is also the crown jewel of the continent. It is one of the world's biggest financial centers, financial services centers, the world over. It can compete effectively with London, with Boston, with New York, with Frankfurt, and so on. Everything you want by way of financial and financialization instruments, you get here in Johannesburg. The size of the companies that are based in Johannesburg are global companies, even though they are South African companies. I can go on and on and on and on. But Joburg is falling apart. There is also a 75-year-old South African. She's 74 this year. She will be 75 next year, who has stepped forward and said, because Johannesburg does not have people with a fortitude to run it, she will leave Cape Town and live in a sister's backyard to run Johannesburg on behalf of Joburgers themselves. And she is a viable candidate to a lot of people. The reason she is that she can see what we are seeing, that the fundamental problem that we have is not lack of talent, is people who are not willing to step forward to do the right thing, to save the place in which they live. And I want to say, if Helen is a viable candidate for Johannesburg, nobody should complain when an 85-year-old Helen, or however old she will be, a 79-year-old Helen, runs for president in 2029, she will be correct. Because the problem is people prefer to talk and analyze instead of burning in the sun like the rest of us. What's important, therefore, the reason I'm mentioning this is that South Africa is in a point of crisis. It has a problem of analysis rather than people are willing to step forward. You see this at national level. You see this in terms of the people that run various institutions. You are beginning to see a situation where, in a city where people complain about old politicians, a 74-year-old South African is going to be mayor of Johannesburg at 75 next year. And some of the people we know say she's a viable candidate because it's an admission that this city seems unwilling to produce anybody better. That's an admission, and we need to have that conversation, which is why political activism is important for a lot more people. Leaders don't get appointed. They have to step forward and fight. And it is in the fight that people distill themselves as leaders that are worth trusting. Let me keep quiet, Beans.
Thanks very much, Mr. Z. I'm going to hand over to the national chairperson just to ventilate some of the issues in her ecosystem in the Gauteng government.
Thank you, Beans, and thank you, Mr. Z. I think you've definitely laid out some of the achievements that we have been able to achieve over the last year. So from my side, as it's been said, I am the MEC for Agriculture and Rural Development in Gauteng. We have one seat in the provincial legislature, so I also from time to time occupy that seat and perform some degree of my legislative mandate as well. And as it's already been said, one of our key priorities has been about ending hunger. And I think you've all heard that reiterated over and over again. And we've really endeavored to take a very data-driven approach around ending hunger. So not simply to speak about it at a high level, but to work closely with organizations who are active on the ground, who have a lot of data and who are already doing the work. And our approach is focused, of course, on localizing food production through community gardens and backyard gardens and subsistence farming programs. But it's also really about looking at the systems and the food systems that drive affordability of food, that drive availability of food as well in our communities. So really taking on the issue of food waste is a big one for us. We've made the statement, and there's enough data that shows that we are wasting, millions of tons of food every year that's landing up in landfills rather than in communities that could actually use that food. And so one of our key initiatives is also really trying to work again with organizations on the ground, support the work they are doing to ensure that we minimize and reduce food waste. And actually, we really want to take it even to the next level. And through my colleagues in Parliament, we'd like to move to actually sponsoring legislation that bans food waste and prohibits companies who are involved in food production from wasting food. And there's a lot of international precedent around this, and so we are currently in that research phase and trying to understand how that would work in our context. But that's something we'd like to see, and we want to see get the industry behind that initiative. Mr. Z also spoke extensively around, job creation. And this is a phrase that gets bandied about excessively in the political space. But I think for us, it's really about looking at not us being the ones who wave a wand and create jobs, but how do we re-energize the Gauteng economy so that we are better capacitated to create jobs. Agro-processing is one such avenue that we believe holds a lot of possibility, not just for those in the agricultural sector, but even those who are operating in that space, micro producers at all levels. I mean, we've engaged with micro producers who are based in townships, those who are already, supplying to some of the big retailers. And we see a lot of opportunity there. So we hosted our first agro-processing convention. Through that, we managed to sign an agreement with the National Empowerment Fund, wherein we are establishing jointly a blended financing fund of 100 million rand to support micro-processors all over the province. And we've already seen 32 different companies that have gone through that process, through the due diligence process, and are ready for funding. So we're really moving on some of these initiatives and looking for opportunities for sustainable job creation. And I think I won't go over too many of the others, but suffice to say, continuing to support young people, the leaders of the future, as Mr. Z said, is really about us now supporting agricultural education in the province. And a big part of it just also starts with awareness. So we have been focusing on a schools program, many of you would have seen. The beginning of this year was really spent going to schools, driving agricultural industry awareness, getting young people energized and activated around the possibilities in this sector, planting food gardens, working with the leadership in these various schools to support school agricultural programs to really try and drive up some awareness in this space. From a GPU perspective, I think there's not too much to add except to say that we obviously are represented in the government of provincial unity. And thus far, we have been part of contributing to the joint program of action of the Gauteng provincial government. And so we also, because of, I suppose, also the smaller cabinet size, we have been able to really contribute and make our voice heard on some of the issues that are important to us. Local government stability is a big one, ensuring that we drive prudent financial management, we root out corruption, we ensure that we have a capable and ethical state. These are all issues that we've placed firmly on the agenda of the Gauteng provincial government. You would have seen recently there are announcements that have been made about actually dealing with some of the capacity challenges in local government. And we're happy to see that something is happening in terms of reorganizing the senior management of the Gauteng provincial government. And also from where we are sitting, the issues that we have raised, you would have seen the container project that we brought to the fore. We blowing a whistle on ourselves effectively, but it's important because our role is also to drive accountability internally within our own department, and that is now sitting with the SIU under investigation, and we're hoping to see a swift resolution on that matter. So all in all, the work continues, but we're proud of the achievements thus far in that we have been able to drive a few meaningful initiatives within the department that speak directly to the promise that we made to the citizens who elected us just over a year ago. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. Colleagues, we will open the floor for Q&A. Standard protocols, just state your name, the media house that you represent, as well as who your question is directed at. My colleague, Danisila, has a roving mic. Step. Behind.
Stay. Yeah.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Tembi Lecele with Bloomberg News. Just on the proposed expansion of the GNU, is that something which Rise Mzansi supports? And also, what is your understanding of the statement of intent in that regard? So does it allow for that to happen? Must there be a consultation? Can Cyril Ramaphosa take an executive decision that that's what he would like to do, even if there is no consensus? And then my last one would be on the statement of intent itself. Are there any plans to expand it further or to formalize the framework which governs the GNU? Thanks very much.
Good morning. My name is Yamtanda Kapa from News 24. Mr. Zibi, you spoke quite extensively around the GNU, and I want to ask you with regards to your role in that space. But okay, you know what? Let me start with. Sorry about that. Firstly, you said that you're speaking to other parties about the local government elections. Can you name those parties? Can you talk to us about who they are? Is it an ideology thing? And to what extent have you spoken to them? And in terms of the GNU, are there any fears of disappearing in the mess and everything that's happening there as Rise? I mean, right now you're talking about speaking to other parties. Awoyiki kuba. Yeah, thank you.
Natasha?
Thank you so much. It's Natasha Perry here from SABC News. Just to follow up in regards to Steve's question on the proposed expansion of the GNU. You've criticized the ANC for not consulting with Rise Mzansi. Have they finally spoken to you about it? And is it a cause of concern that the Clearinghouse Committee has still not adopted the terms of reference in the GNU? And then Siam Tanda also asks about the proposed merger. Earlier on this year, Action SA, Bosa and yourselves had indicated, like you've also cited here in the briefing earlier on, that, talks are still underway. How far are talks at an advanced stage that indeed you guys will be actually merging together to contest next year's elections? Because I do understand, as Rise Mzansi, it's going to be the first time that you're contesting the local government elections next year. Perhaps also your preparations ahead of that. What lessons have you learned from contesting the 2024 elections? What could you do better, perhaps, as Rise Mzansi? On your observations on the National Convention, what do you say to the criticism that it was a waste of time? On the last day, towards the end of the National Convention, Mandisa Kayile had actually announced that and reminded delegates that people won't be compensated for this. And the mood just totally changed. So many people actually went to the National Convention thinking that money was actually a motivating factor. As Rise Mzansi, what do you think about that? And could you say, Guti, it was a futile exercise, actually, because some people actually thought that they were going there to get a chunk of the 700 million rand, right? Did I miss anything?
There'll be another round.
That's it.
There'll
That's
be
an
another
assignment
round.
you gave me. Gave me an assignment.
We'll end the first round there, and then we'll start with you in the second round. Mr. Z, over to you.
Thanks very much. You know what? The expansion of the GNU is not an issue in and of itself. But to not fix the structural problems in the GNU and then invite more people into the chaos is not a good idea, in our view. And this is something that has been discussed fairly candidly, amongst the political parties and so on. So I don't think that coalition arrangements should be exclusive arrangements where you in principle don't want to work with anyone. The nature of coalitions is that you work with others, right? But what's important is to make sure that structurally the GNU functions. What do I mean by that? And I might touch on some of your questions, Natasha. Currently, you have 9 agreements, not one. The statement of intent is not an agreement amongst all the political parties. The DA has no obligations with the Patriotic Alliance. The Patriotic Alliance has no obligations with Rise Mzansi. Rise Mzansi has no obligation with the PAC. Everybody is in a polygamous marriage with the ANC. Now you are having problems of them Seleku family playing out while the country is in crisis. It's not a good idea to not fix that structural issue. Our position as Rise Mzansi is you need to change the current agreement and make it a mutually binding agreement amongst all the political parties. We have obligations in terms of how we behave. We have obligations in terms of what our minimum political program is going to be, how we're going to work together, and so on. We cannot repeat this mess that we had with the budget. And you end up with that mess when basically the one party is to keep running between 9 different venues to talk to people. It just doesn't work. And so we're not opposed to the idea of other parties joining the GNU. But without a minimum political program, you also don't know who can be part of the arrangement and who can't, in terms of whether you're driving in the same direction or not. For example, there are parties with lots of criminal accused in them. So what do we do now if, for instance, they say, okay, we want to join the GNU as well? Now you end up with a problem of a new discussion about whether they can be part of it or not. You know what I mean? So the expansion in and of itself, in principle, is not an issue. The lack of political management is a problem. The restructuring of the GNU is an important precursor to then having other parties. So I'm hoping that I've answered that question to your satisfaction. So Siyamthanda, I won't name the parties. Suffice to say, they are all represented in Parliament. They are all in the opposition benches or the GNU, a combination right across. And the reason I'm not naming them is because these conversations are usually complex. You know, one of the most frequent questions that we get asked, V and Ghana and our other colleagues get asked the question, why don't you guys work together? Hey, it's not simple. Once you get into a conversation and you're now discussing the modalities of working together, there are policy issues, there are issues of what kind of political culture do you want to build, what kind of politics do you represent, are you progressive, are you center left, and these are very important things. What's important in this discussion is pragmatism. That places the interests of South Africans at the center, at the front and center of what we do. So when I said we need to get over ourselves a little bit, I meant that it's not possible to get into a cooperation arrangement where you're contesting an election together in some form and none of you are willing to make compromises. You kind of see what the points of compromise are, as long as the bigger goal has been agreed to. Just by way of an anecdote, very quickly, I spoke to somebody who was involved in the formation of COSATU. And he said one of the things they couldn't agree on at the beginning was whether they would endorse the ANC or not. So they formed COSATU without making that decision. It was only later that the National Union of Mine Workers, which was not an ANC-aligned union, suggested they back the Freedom Charter. Now the point is, if you don't get started and you want to tick every single box, or you have some non-negotiables which should be negotiable, then it's a problem. You know, you can't move. But it's something we're hoping to bring to a head within the next month, right? So that we can have some kind of public communication. So I hope that the other question that you asked was, do we have any fears of disappearing in the mess, being in the GNU and so on? You know, one of the disadvantages we had during the election was a name recognition problem. In that people would hear about Rise Mzansi, but they don't quite know Songezo. You guys obviously know who Songezo is. But a lot of voters would find out, can I trust this person? What are they about? So they have to start like researching to find out who we are. One of the advantages of being in Parliament and playing the roles that we're playing, which are very public, front-facing roles, is that now people get to see how you perform when you've been elected. Do they like what you're doing? Because that's part of the considerations towards voting. Do we like what you're doing and so on? That's why earlier I spoke about various things that we're doing. So Makashule is Mr. Gambling. Not in that he makes people gamble, but you know, he's fighting for regulation of the gambling industry, especially online gambling. That's an issue that South Africans care about. It's one of the contributors to trust. I'm chairperson of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts. We drive various issues and we facilitated some solutions at ESCOM in as far as municipal debt is concerned and so on. People get to see what you do when you govern and voice as well. So I would say the opposite, by the way, in that the problem that we had, which was, what are these guys about? There's far less of that. But even so, it's important that we achieve scale by working together with other political parties. Natasha, expansion, the expansion I think I've dealt with, right? In a way that is helpful. So I won't go there. So let me go to the criticizing the ANC for not consulting. I think I may have said something slightly different. which is the ANC forgets that it is in a coalition. And that is the organization, the ANC as a body. I talk to ANC MPs, I talk to ANC NEC members, I talk to ANC ministers. Sometimes you have this conversation where you're like, okay, that's very interesting, but remember the numbers have to number, right? You can't just say we want to do this. You have to make sure that there is consensus in doing that. So that's the ANC's, I would say, brain muscle problem. The DA has a problem of its own, which is it hasn't yet worked out how to be in government and also maintain a distinct identity in the manner that I think all of us are trying to do. So how far can you oppose and undermine and criticize and insult your colleagues and that kind of thing? And these are problems that both parties have had to work on. In as far as consultation is concerned, we don't have that problem. Whether it is at party level, it is in the whippery in Parliament with Mdumiseni and his colleagues. In fact, two of the top 5 of the ANC in Parliament are in my committee, Cameron Dagmo and Gijimani Skosana. One, and secondly, as far as ministers are concerned, we don't have a problem with access to ministers and getting various things done. In fact, we played a significant role in the background in getting this third budget over the line, and that was a factor of just working together with the finance minister and other figures in the ANC to get the budget over the line, not just a VAT issue. So I don't have a concern to that. The convention is not a waste of time. It's not a waste of time. I don't think we must get used to the idea. So I get a chance as an elected politician to debate every week in Parliament. South Africans only get to tweet or to post on Facebook and so on. They are never heard talking about their experiences in full. One. Secondly, for them to get the opportunity to be in one room, build alliances, decide how they're going to work together to drive a common agenda. People talk about civil society. Civil society is thousands of organizations. Wherever there is an opportunity for all of those people to gather in one place and start deciding what their common political program is going to be, whether the government likes it or not, it's a good thing as far as I'm concerned. The issue of money is very interesting because, again, it's easy from a distance to say it's a waste of money, we shouldn't do it and that kind of thing. But one of the things that people have to consider is that there is a cost to participation, especially when you've traveled, right? Now, I don't want to say people are necessarily greedy, but some people have taken unpaid leave. That is one of the structural reasons why people don't participate in politics. It costs them money. It costs them money. They have to buy themselves food. They have to do all sorts of things. So in this environment with high cost of living, some people are going to go back home and they're out of pocket and they can't make it to the end of the month. So I don't regard those people as being necessarily opportunists. South Africans are struggling out there. If you're coming from the unemployed people's movement and you are there and you normally get peace jobs and you've missed out on peace jobs for the whole week and you must still pay your bills at the end of the month. So what I'm trying to say, I wish that there was to be a more nuanced understanding of the kind of challenges people have. Money has been an issue in this thing. And believe me, it started higher than 700 million. And one day the story of the money hopefully will come out. Of course, it's an expensive exercise. I don't think we should spend that kind of money. I think we should spend tens of millions, certainly not 700 million, certainly not 500 million. We shouldn't spend that kind of money. But the idea that you can convince South Africans under trees in the rain is also silly. Somebody needs to rent venues, make sure there's water, make sure there's some food, sandwiches for people to eat and that kind of thing. Those who don't have transport want to participate. We do the same with Imbizos. Why can't we help South Africans get to a meeting in the nearest place? So anyway, that's my view on the convention. It's not perfect, but the people need to have a political program they want to drive after.
Thanks, Mr. Z. I just want Ghana to add some color to some of the GNU deliberations, given that he's deals intimately with various party whips, as well as the convention, which he was in attendance to.
Thanks, Vince. Maybe, I think one of the questions that you asked, Natasha, related to the clearinghouse. So I represent Rise Mzansi in the clearinghouse. And it's true that we did not really adopt the terms of reference. So the posture that we had taken was that because the GNU itself is still finding its own feet, then the terms of reference are a work in progress. We did agree in terms of the, let's call it, the issues that will serve in the clearinghouse. It's just unfortunate that it hasn't convened since March. The budget was supposed to be one of the issues that we believe should have been dealt with by the clearinghouse, because it was a contestation amongst members of the GNU. So that didn't happen. But as Zibi has said, it's important to get the structures of the GNU to work, and not only wait for a crisis. Because at the moment, it feels like the GNU comes to life when there's a crisis. When there's no crisis, people forget that there's a GNU, and we're almost waiting for a crisis. And what we have expressed to the ANC, but also to the Deputy President who's chairing the clearinghouse, is that we must not wait for a crisis. We must be proactive, because the GNU needs to work, not just for political parties, but for South Africa as a whole. I think on the second one, being the convention, and just to add, I think there are aspects that, having been in attendance, especially on Friday, when there were the breakaway sessions, those sessions were very productive. If any of you did move between sessions, you will agree that South Africans were participating, and we take for granted, especially ourselves who maybe we live in the political space every day, how much people might not understand how the country functions. And some of the questions were like, there still need to be more civic education. One of the things that I do complain about is that after 97, 98, civic education, even on the media, the public broadcaster, has taken a backseat. And we assume that people are born with this knowledge. And in the breakaway that I was in, there was a young lady born after 2000. And she was saying that, no, there are many things that have been said in that meeting that she was not even aware of. Because the spaces that she moves in, those are not topical issues. So if you are lucky to have been born in the 70s, 80s, and you observed the transition into democracy, and you participated, you observed it, then you are better informed than those that are born after 2000. Because there's very little around the civic education in the media, public broadcast, and so forth. So this convention for ourselves, it needs to go to every community. It needs to go to every community so that people can say the kind of South Africa that they want to live in, but also answer the questions of who must lead. The last point in the previous round that Mr. Zibi raised, it's around leadership. We debated whether Section 19.3, where it says that every adult is free to stand for office, contest, whether that should remain. That was a debate, and I think South Africans need to reflect on that. Because when we say there's a crisis of leadership, are we saying that everyone should be free to stand? So these are some of the things that people were raising in the conversations, and I think will benefit by having the national dialogue that's rolled out in all communities than just cancelling it. That's our view. Thanks very much.
Thank you. We'll start with Nonkululeko.
Morning, it's Nonkululeko from Daily Maverick. Makashule and you, Sangwezo, you keep speaking about how the GNU only meets when there's sort of a crisis. Are you able to tell us how many times exactly has the GNU met since its formation? I think over a year ago. Secondly, given all these challenges, why have you chosen to stay in the GNU? Would you not perhaps play a better role in the opposition benches? And do you not fear that the electorate might sort of punish you, for being a part of a government that is seen as failing ordinary citizens? Thank you.
Mrs. Buzi.
Morning, Busibo Pello from the SABC. I'm asking this question in the context of your role as the chairperson of public accounts and talking about kind of parallel structures, specifically with regards to the national dialogue as well as the Mkonazi Commission. First of all, there is this issue of taxpayer money once you set up parallel structures. You talk about the fact that it's important to have the national dialogue because there's a cost to democracy. But the truth of the matter is that you have parliament and you have MPs that are supposed to represent people who are supposed to, in their caucuses, go to their constituencies. Should we not be fixing that system as opposed to actually setting up a parallel structure that for all intents and purposes is a once-off structure, even if it is going to be a year long? And then in terms of the Mkonazi Commission, in the same kind of vein, with regards to also the parliamentary process, these are two processes that are going on about the very same thing, the parallel processes that I'm talking about. At the end of the day, it's about how do you institutionalize whatever recommendations are going to come out of each one of these. And it doesn't seem as if there's any kind of clarity in terms of what is going to happen. So doesn't this really suggest that there is kind of a wastage in terms of the resources that are put into some of these parallel structures, and yet there are processes and mechanisms that exist to actually take care of these things?
News 24.
Thank you so much. With regards to the comments you made around General Mapwanya and his trip to Iran, you actually said that it irritates you considering the audit outcomes that the defense has yielded over years. What sort of sanction do you think should befall him? The DA has called for a court-martial. What does Mzansi think should happen there? We also spoke to the Minister of Defense this weekend, and she says she sees nothing wrong with what the general has done. Where does Mzansi stand in that regard? In terms of the ad hoc committee in Parliament, Makashule, I don't understand. It's my understanding you're not on that committee, correct? Or are you? Okay. All right. Given, I know that they are meeting today to discuss terms of reference, but I know the parties have agreed that the makeup is going to be a numbers thing. And it looks like the ANC is also trying to run that process and just sort of, it might be their show. Where do you stand there? Do you also regret not being on there if you're not? Thank you.
EWN.
Good morning, Alpha here from Eyewitness News. I also wanted to ask about Rudzani Mapwanya, but I'm covered in terms of consequence management. At national government, part of the criticism is that the ANC isn't consulting some of its coalition partners. The decision to expand the government of national unity was taken by the NEC and not necessarily the parties in the GNU. Is that the same sentiment here in Gauteng? Is Banyaza and his ANC people in Gauteng consulting coalition partners on whatever program of action is there, what needs to be done to improve government? Or is there some level of coordination in the Gauteng coalition? Thanks.
Natasha, you said we skipped one of your questions. If you could just ask it again.
The proposed merger between Action SA, Rise Mzansi and Bosa, and also the preparations ahead of the local government elections, seeing that you'll be contesting for the first time. Thank you.
Sure. If we can start with the national chair.
Thanks. I'll just respond to your question, Alpha. Oh, I see.
Oh, sure. But answer it.
Anyway, let me respond nonetheless. So I think there's a distinction between the work of government and, let me say, the political management and the interface between the parties that has to be made. Our involvement, of course, our inputs at a cabinet level, etc., we are consulted adequately because we sit at that table. We're involved in the decisions that are made at an exco level. So 100%, that is without question. And I would even go further and say, perhaps even when it comes to the consultation around the things that impact our participation in government, for example, the budgets. Whenever there are changes to the budget, we've been consulted, for example, by the MEC Finance, etc. And we have had successive consultations. So I would say there's a much more consultative culture or environment that we are operating in. That being said, we are separate parties and we are distinct from each other. So it may well be that the Gauteng Provincial ANC takes decisions that don't pertain to us or that don't come through us first, just like it would have happened at the NEC. And that is the nature of the beast. There are going to be resolutions that get taken at a party level that do not necessarily go through our approval process first, but then they would then be brought to us at a later stage to say, this is the direction that we would like to take. Up to this point, though, there have not been any such contentious matters. And fortunately, I think we have been able to cultivate quite a consultative process, even as it pertains to, even the Premier's own program of action, the restructuring of the senior management that I mentioned earlier. We were consulted on that. Budget issues we've been consulted on. So I'd say, there has been so far a culture of open consultation, but I can't speak for what gets decided or resolved at an ANC PEC level. It's not for us to be consulted on their party political agenda or direction of travel. Thanks.
Before I get to you, Mr. Zia, I think I'm going to start with Ghana just to respond on the ad hoc committee and the work happening there.
All right, thanks. So you're correct. I'm not a member. So the ad hoc committee has got 11 members. So as the other parties, so that's from the IFP all the way to Good, we have 2 representatives in the ad hoc committee. So how the committee set up in Parliament is that because the numbers, it's 11 for every committee. So it will be 4 ANC, 2 DA, 2 MK, 1 EFF, and 2 the rest of the other political parties. So we did have a meeting wherein we then resolved that the representatives will be from the IFP and the PA. But one of the rules in Parliament, it allows for any other member of Parliament to participate. It's just that you will not vote. But participate, you'll just not vote. So I will participate. So at the moment, the ad hoc committee is dealing with administrative terms of reference and all that. Once the first witness is called, I will be there. And the questions will be asked. And the voice of Rise Mzansi will be heard. And just on the other question around us being in the GNU and whether we'll be better off outside as opposition When we make our own assessment, we believe that the work that we do in Parliament, the work that Vuiswa does in Gauteng, people have seen and they've taken notice of what we do. And even those that were skeptical, thinking that will be swallowed by the GNU, they can see that no, the politics of rise and representing South Africans did not die with us signing to be part of the GNU. And we will continue to make the GNU that we are part of to succeed. Because when the GNU succeeds, South Africa will succeed. We don't subscribe to the politics that say we need to wait and benefit from when things are bad. If there's an opportunity for us to contribute to make South Africa a better place, to make South Africa a safe, prosperous, equal and united, we will do that and not wait for 5 years and say we must wait to benefit when things have gone terribly wrong, because rebuilding is more difficult. That's why we do what we do in the GNU, and we try to make the GNU to succeed. Thank you.
Over to you, Mr. Z.
Thank you very much. So how many times has the GNU met? So I would assume, Nonkulego, that is at a political level rather than at a cabinet level, right? Because cabinet meets on a regular basis. So there are different structures. I mean, Ghana can talk about the clearinghouse. I think he said it last met in March. I think before that it probably had met one more time before, and then it was last year when the Bella issue was. So there are a couple of meetings there, but also to work on the terms of reference themselves for the clearinghouse. The leaders have met 1, 2, 3 times, I think, of the GNU. There's a meeting that is planned to come up, which will be a much longer meeting. So the last time the leaders met was to agree on the budget that we have on the table now. So the point is, we don't have regularized meetings where we know that every 60 days we meet, or on the first Tuesday of every second month, whatever the case might be. We meet to discuss a set agenda as well as all matters arising. That's the point. You can have a high frequency of meetings, but if the structuring and purpose of those meetings is all over the place, you also will have a suboptimal outcome. So ours is, the quantity sure is an issue, but the quality and structure are more important. Because the president is busy, and all of us are busy. I hardly have time to do anything, so I can't be in meetings on a regular. But the lack of structure is a problem. I think Ghana has answered the question about being seen as a failure. No, I mean, there's a lot more that MPs can do, by the way. The example that I gave about Ghana and the issues that is driving, being an MP doesn't always mean like criticizing the ANC. There is a political party, I won't name it, and they always ask, Minister, will you resign if this doesn't happen? Okay. And then what? The minister doesn't resign. Then what? Can you really go and tell voters that I have asked all the ministers to resign and they haven't? Give me more votes. No. However, Ghana can say, we fought online gambling. There were no regulations before. There are regulations now. And we're well on our way to getting regulations. It's an intangible thing that you can take to voters and say, this wasn't happening, now it is happening. So I think the orientation around what one does when you're into opposition, so that's in opposition is important. So that is the one thing. There is a reason why we lobbied for this role that I'm doing. Because specifically, you're not seen as part of the executive, because you are not. Your job is to hold the executive accountable. And therefore, people can't, I see some accusations on Twitter that say I'm earning a high ministerial salary. But I'm not. I'm an MP, and I've got independence in my role to call to account mayors, other officials, chief executives of companies, chairs, ministers, etc., which is what South Africans want. Overall, the feedback at least that I get, maybe it's the people who like what I'm doing, the feedback is quite good about the work that we're doing in Parliament. We're not seen as kind of being so ingrained in the establishment that, people don't want to look at us. So I think that's important. Busi, so we have to talk about this thing about parallel structures. Our constitutional scheme creates parallel structures all the time because the executive and the legislature are different. Parliament cannot say, because Minister X says, I've launched an investigation, then Parliament says, okay, we won't do our work then to demand accountability because the President has appointed a commission and therefore Parliament must stand down and wait for the commission, and therefore there are questions that the commission cannot reasonably ask because they go to political decision making, and Parliament can ask those questions. Parliament can choose to ask the President, why did you wait so long with Andrew Chauke in Gauteng when Shamila Batoyi asked you 2 years ago? No need to wait for Justice Madlanga to ask that question. Parliament must ask that question. Parliament has the powers of subpoena. And the Constitution forces the business of Parliament to be in public so that South Africans can see their MPs working. So the parallel structures are in our constitutional scheme. The question we need to ask is whether those structures that get set up are effective. One of the things we know from the previous Parliament that Judge Zondo raised, and which is true, which is by a show of hands, the ANC MPs would say, there's no swimming pool in Gandla, it's a fire pool. And therefore, where's the value of a parallel structure? Thuli Madonsela is able to say it is a swimming pool. You get it. So you really have to work with the parallel structures. The cops might decide there's not enough, or the NPA might decide there's not enough of a case to prosecute someone. But Parliament may decide there has been sufficient misconduct for a person to be fired anyway. You understand? So the parallel structures are in the constitutional scheme itself. Now let me go to the national dialogue. One of the mistakes South Africans in general make is to think we can legislate everything. Let me give you an example. South Africans beat up and kill, South African men beat up and kill South African women for sport. That's not a policing problem. That's not a policing problem. The cops can't be at every date where somebody and their boyfriend or girlfriend are having a nice time and they are drinking, and then the man decides outside that I don't like something about what you're saying, and they beat up that person. There is a conversation South African men need to have about why we are so violent towards women. That's not a legislative. There's laws to prosecute people. There are certain uncomfortable conversations that we need to have about the state of our society and how we change some of the behavior. People who complain about corruption also bribe cops and so on, or pay money at Home Affairs to jump the queue and that kind of thing. There are behavioral things in the society that need a conversation so that society may make its own decisions about how to fight those issues. People don't appear to think it's important, and I'm not referring to you. People say this to me. Yeah, but it's a policing problem. What? Somebody beating their wife at home. What? Are we going to deploy a cop in every house? So the organizations that deal with gender-based violence, both men and women organizations, need to strategize together about what needs to happen. Churches need to question their role about how some of those doctrines entrench patriarchy in society. Where is that conversation to take place? When the outcomes of not having it are so violent and get people killed. So that's why I'm saying we need to be a little patient with ourselves. The last point I want to make about the dialogue is that we have had an interim transitional arrangement from the Constitution. Some of the clauses of the Constitution were supposed to kind of evolve over time. They never have. It's time South Africans genuinely had a conversation about who should represent them. Is it really okay to have a criminal accused being sworn in after the fact in Parliament to become an MP, and we have to call them honorable? The day after they were charged with fraud, with the whole indictment read out, the next day I have to say, hey, honorable so-and-so, I, honorable ma'am. It's a farce. It undermines confidence in the democracy. Where should we have that conversation? South Africans should have that conversation and then say, in 2029, I am not voting for anybody. And as these organizations, we agree, we will not vote for any organization that puts criminal accused in parliament. And we are going to fight for the law to change. So we must see the national dialogue as having an essential subversive element. Because the politicians on their own will not, unlike turkeys that we expect to vote for Christmas. They will not, right? So let's tolerate the parallel structures. Let me talk about the general. The general was out of line. If my name was Cyril Ramaphosa and I was a president, I would tell him he's retiring on the 31st of December and somebody is taking over on the 1st of January and name that person. Here is why. There is a culture in South Africa, and I will talk about the corruption and the mismanagement in the armed forces because we have to lay the facts bare on the table because people don't pay attention, South Africans generally, when we discuss these things in parliament, right? Generals or army officers are not supposed to make political statements at all. What the general said in Iran can be said by Angie Motshekga, not him. That Angie is spineless and does not want to deal with the issue. Does not mean she is correct. She herself is wrong. And if I was the president, I would also dismiss her as defense minister due to unsuitability and having zero strategic awareness, like the general, who has zero strategic awareness, who has zero diplomatic maturity, who thinks he is a politician when he is not. There was nothing urgent that required the general to go to Iran. Why is that interaction important? We have $3.2 billion of trade with the United States annually. With Iran, I think it's about $160 million. It's peanuts. Pakistan and Ronald Lamola are busy trying to save South African jobs. The US and Iran are enemies. What does this general do? He goes there, he runs his mouth because he has no strategic awareness whatsoever, undermining the work that Pakistan and Ronald Lamola are doing. Why would he do that? There is a feeling by South Africans that he's a general, he should be able to say anything. Nonsense. That's ill discipline. He must be fired. And it's not the first time the defense forces have gone rogue. There was a head of the Navy who blamed Treasurer for the state of the army. I can give you chapter and verse about how those people have run the army to the ground. Those people who buy obsolete equipment, who are fixing an old ship so that it can sail to Cuba for diplomatic relations. Diplomacy is not their job. Why are they fixing the SAS Drakensberg to go to Cuba? To do what? Why are we training doctors in Cuba? Why do we have technicians from Cuba when we've got top-notch engineering training here in South Africa? These are the people that are taking those stupid decisions in the army, and we must mollycoddle them when they waste taxpayers' money and they go and say stupid things overseas. I would retire that guy. He's out of line. He's ill-disciplined. He is incapable of running the defense forces. They've got the worst audit outcome record of any government department for years by a long stretch. And they refuse to accept civilian oversight. And they use the term civilian in derogatory tones within the defense force. I know it. I get full briefings from the Auditor General, confidential briefings too. The army is a mess and those people have destroyed it. And this guy is going to make political statements overseas. It is a factor of how much the president has allowed people to act with impunity under his watch that we have a situation like this. That's the problem. He should fire that guy and hire someone else. And that person should not be somebody who was with MK who thinks he's a politician when he's supposed to be a professional soldier. These people don't know how to run a professional army. That's a fact. If you took the trouble to talk to mid-rank officers who joined the army after 1994, they eventually leave because those people promote each other and they are useless. So no, we must call a spade a spade. We must call a spade a spade. The country has gone to the dogs because we don't call a spade like this. And Angie herself for defending that guy after having initially said she knew nothing about it. If she knew nothing about it and the president knew nothing about it, what is she defending? Does she want to be defense minister or not? So I'm sorry, I am not backing down on that one. I get the briefings. I see what's happening in the defense force. I can show you pictures where the uniform does not look the same. When they had the military exercises in Luhatla, they couldn't even bring a mobile toilets. The people were taking a dump in the field. Soldiers were taking a dump in the field because they had no toilets. And he's busy making political statements and undermining the interests of the country. We can't have that. I'm sorry. The point about a consultation of GNU members about expanding it. Look, the point I've made is the statement of intent is flawed as an agreement. Our view is that rework the entire thing. Because of the nature of it, it's also that we also can't vote to kick out, let's say, the DA. The DA has got no relationship with any contractual relationship with anyone. It is up to the ANC to decide whether they want to remain married to the DA or not, or any other political party, right? So the whole thing is, when you talk about the restructuring of the GNU, that's what we mean. Under that circumstance, with mutual obligations, you can have a better structured conversation about whether we're happy that one of us is being kicked off or not. Currently, under the same agreement, the ANC can simply decide, we don't like Rise Mzansi, we don't want to work with you guys anymore. It doesn't affect the PAC. Or they can decide not to work with the PAC, it doesn't affect Rise Mzansi and so on. So the whole thing is flawed. And then, Natasha, I am not going to help you because you are asking this question about which parties in a smart way. Look, Natasha, we've been talking to various, that conversation with Action has continued to take place in various guises over time. The only thing I can guarantee you is that Rise Mzansi has been the most open to talk to various political parties, including Action SA, to bring about a deal. It would just be irresponsible to say at this stage where those sensitive conversations with various parties are. But believe me, it will not be a month and you will be released from misery, and we will know. But we continue to talk. We continue to talk to various political parties. So I'm sorry. There was another question that you had asked about lessons learned from the last. Look, one of the lessons I spoke about the name recognition issue and the track record. When people don't have a track record, you just sound interesting. But they want to see what you've done. We can now say, these are the things that we have. These are the things that we have done. So that is the first thing. The second thing is, I think most of us try and be everywhere. I think that's a mistake. That's a strategic mistake that we did. We should have focused on certain areas and maximized the use of resources and the quality, therefore, of the activists that we had available to us. And I think we might have done a heck of a lot better. The third one is that South Africans are disgruntled with politics. One of the reasons, to go back to Musi, one of the reasons I support the national dialogue is that a lot of South Africans didn't even vote. So when you say to them, MPs are discussing in parliament, they're not interested. They didn't even vote. But they might show up at something where they are having their own discussion and the politicians don't own the discussion. I think you would have seen that in the dialogue. The biggest point of contention is the extent to which the politicians appear to be running the thing, right? And so that's a lesson that we've learned. One of the things that's a positive is that politics where you drive specific issues affecting South Africans really does work, right? I really believe that even with the gambling issue or some of the work that the committee is doing, and there'll be a benefit for all the political parties in fixing the road accident fund. The road accident fund affects the lives of over 1 million people per year. People who lose breadwinners, kids injured, people who need wheelchairs and this kind of thing. We might think, it's made to be about the palace politics of who's the chief executive. Actually, for us as the committee, it's different. Is a person who claims from the road accident fund and needs a wheelchair getting it within 6 months? The answer is no, they don't. It takes years. Parliament cannot be okay with that. So people will see those things, and when they can see a tangible difference in their lives, they make a different voting decision. The committee is a multi-party structure, and the reason the other members are participating hard is for the same reason.
Thank you very much. Members of the media, we're going to close it there. If there are follow-up questions, we can facilitate one-on-ones with any of the leaders present here. I'd like to thank you for your time. I know there are many things happening in the country and you could have deployed your resources elsewhere. And I think just from this briefing, we've been sitting here for about 90 minutes. It's clear that Rise Mzansi is a party at work. With just 3 public representatives, a lot of work is being done. On Mondays, these leaders engaged in public work when Vuiso is not being an MEC or MPL. She's in communities after hours when the clock strikes 5. It's not that she stops working like many amongst us, but she's on the ground ensuring that Rise Mzansi is not just a party that is seen in high office, but also a party that is in communities. I know many of you also frustrated when I can't secure Mr. Z for interviews. Most Tuesdays to Fridays, he's chairing the committee. It's a full-time job, and then goes into the house. Equally, Ghana sitting in committees, and then he goes to the house, and then there's leaving Cape Town and then coming back to Gauteng to ensure that we continue with that work. So once again, thank you to the leaders. We required some fancy footwork to get them, all 3 of them, into this room. And also want to thank the teams that support this work. There's of course a team in Parliament. There's a team at our head office, led by our ED. There are also teams in the MEC's office, as well as the Gauteng Provincial Legislature. Thank you for the work that you do. And once again, thank you to the members of the 4th Estate for your time. And I'm sure we'll meet soon. It's most likely in the next month or so where Makashule Ghana will lead a picket outside the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition around gambling. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your day and have a wonderful week.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Mr. G, are you thinking about getting up? Eish. Sorry, my friend. Yo, Chair, you get leave. Do MECs get leave? Yo.